Good evening. Thank you. Welcome to the December 17th, 2018 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll begin with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery,
Here.
Commissioner Roth,
Here.
Commissioner Peterson,
Here.
Commissioner Willoughby,
Here.
Commissioner Beanhoff,
Here.
Commissioner Busby is here, Commissioner Wise,
Here.
Commissioner Braley,
Here.
Commissioner Les Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Mudgett, Commissioner John Smith.
Here. Here.
Thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Also, I'd like to welcome Ward 3 City Councilman Lisa Brunel here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. Consent agenda. Items 1 through 6 are listed under the consent items agenda. Unless there is a request to remove one of these items from the consent agenda, the items will be approved in one motion. Is there a request to remove any items from the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Les Smith.
We generally ask for residents.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. I would like to ask that we remove item number 3, final plat approval for Kenneth Estates, first plat.
Very fine. Is there a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda? Commissioner Peterson.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items except number 3. For approval with staff recommendations.
Thank you. Commissioner Beanhoff.
Second that motion.
Motion and second to approve the items under the consent agenda 1 through 6, excluding number 3. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. And as that's been pulled off the consent agenda, we normally go with that as the first item. So, as it fit within the realm of consent agenda, then I presume at this point in time, Commissioner Les Smith should explain why he would like it off there.
Yes, if we could ask if there's questions or anything that we can clarify.
Okay. Yes, you may. I know at the Planning Commission on the 16th of July, we forwarded a recommendation for approval with some conditions, some specific, some strongly implied. And there's a couple of things that didn't happen. One of those was the traffic calming device as it approaches Fairway Hills at the end of Richards Road. And I would like some explanation as to why we were not able to figure out something we could do there.
Well, I will try to do that. When the item went forward in July, we went back and actually reviewed the minutes. And I think there was some disconnect there between what you were implying that you wanted and I think what we interpreted what you wanted. The term full consideration of traffic calming was asked, and at the staff level, we did examine traffic calming, and it was determined that it was not necessarily required. Since then, obviously, we had a late-minute meeting with chairman and came up with what we thought was an answer to hopefully get you guys what you wanted and get you where you needed to be. If that's not the case, then we've been clear.
What is that solution, proposed solution?
It's the stamped concrete treatment between the two subdivisions. Effectively acts as a rumble strip to define the two subdivisions. I think I've even forwarded some photographs of what.
Excuse me.
But if that's not satisfactory, then we need to know right now what you guys are.
Well, and I appreciate that. I went up to Johnson Drive and wherever it is, that you gave me some examples of, and that's, I mean, you really can't even feel driving over them, let them be like rumble strips, especially if you get a little bit of snow on the ground. What I was hoping for when I brought it up was Some people talked about an island and stuff, and I know that we're not fond of those, but even just a speed table where that decorative crossing that you talk about is actually a speed table about 3 inches high with gradual increases on both sides and about 6 to 8 feet wide. It's very plowable. It doesn't damage vehicles, and public safety can get over it. It's only noticeable if you're really flying, down the hill. So unless this has some height to it, some profile, it's not acceptable for what I thought we were asking for.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that. The second thing is that we had also asked for a meeting between staff and the HOA's civil engineer to discuss storm drainage. I was told this afternoon that that didn't happen. Did that?
That did not happen.
Okay.
The late notice, the meeting did not come together. That does not mean that we could not meet with that professional during design.
Right.
That is an issue that they would be welcome to meet with us during design, final design.
I mean, all they have is they have some questions based on, which parameters we're using, what models we're using and whatnot. The engineer is Paul Miller with George Butler Associates. He's very competent. He's been in the business a long time, and they do a good job. And I think he does have some questions that he would like answered. So if not then, and during design, I mean, we don't want the developer to get too far down the road in spending money to find out that the questions that they have are legitimate. So how does that work?
I can tell you that the stormwater design for that project would meet our city criteria. There may be different quantitative methods that are used. We have competent staff, and we have PEs on staff. We're very able to analyze a storm drainage project. They've done that for years. So we do all of our own in-house design review.
Sure.
But that being said, if there were questions that could be worked out, we would be glad to entertain a meeting with that.
I mean, would it not make sense, though, to have that meeting ahead of time before design actually starts in case you're starting with the wrong basis?
And I think that's what I'm saying, is that before we got to permit issuance, that we would have a meeting with that person to make sure that everybody was on the same page. I don't know how to say it, but sometimes people may just agree to disagree. We have design professionals on
Correct.
staff.
Absolutely.
And we rely on their expertise. We do that on every project in the city.
I think now we're fortunate. We also have Olson Associates doing the Blackfish and Hauser project, which is at the bottom of the hill behind the pool, in essence. So we actually have 3 sets of eyes looking at it. And I know there was a meeting last Thursday with Cynthia, but she indicated that that was not her deal. She looks at them farther down the road, not in advance. So I guess I'm looking to see how we can resolve both those issues. And if we can't come to some resolution, my fellow commissioners would indulge me. I think this thing needs to be tabled for 2 weeks in order to get these things resolved before we move them forward. May not have been specifically mentioned in the minutes, but there were 2 other items that were kind of referenced in that same manner that did get addressed. The cul-de-sac was pulled to the east, and I think some light screening was placed in there.
I think those were more specifically outlined in the recommendation. In fairness to staff, we were not trying to pull a fast one.
I understand that. This is very difficult for me because, no one supports staff better than I do, and I think you guys are wonderful. I'm just also trying to represent the neighborhood who was fairly comfortable with it when they learned that we were going to include some traffic calming feature or decorative feature, whichever we want to call it. And now they're not quite as easy with it, and understand they didn't want it to begin with. But now they're very uneasy with it, and I feel an obligation to bring this forward.
And I would need to clarify, too, you're a recommending body to the governing body. You make recommendations to the city council on final plat. Things that occur within the right-of-way are the purview of the city council. We have a policy for traffic calming, for street design, for medians within the right-of-way. So anything that you do is a recommendation to them. The governing body would ultimately have say over what went within the
Oh, I understand that. Yeah, but as I mentioned before, I think if it goes to the governing body with it in, it's going to be less likely to be taken out than it will be to added at that point. Not that I have any experience on that end of it, but that's my take on it. So I guess I have to stick to what I said. I feel confident that we have enough language regarding the storm drainage and take you for your word that meeting will occur at some point before it's permitted. I'm okay with that, but I do need to address some sort of a traffic calming feature. And I know some other streets were referenced in the staff report, and 3 of the 4 that were mentioned are good comparisons, or 2 of the 3 are good comparisons. Hauser is not, because it comes to a stop and then a complete right turn about 2/3 of the way down. The others, I don't have any data whatsoever. All I know is I was driving down Park today and some lady was scooping up leaves, and I just stopped and asked her, and I said, "Do you have any traffic issues down through here?" And she said, "No, not really. It's not too bad. The only thing is they tend to get rather zippy." Zippy is her word, not my word. So I don't know that just because we haven't done it before, which is part of the argument, doesn't mean we can't do it now. If it's an improvement and there's no adverse effect, no unintended consequences that could, jeopardize safety, and it's a good idea, I don't know why we can't do it, why we can't recommend it. But we have to have something from you all, to recommend, I think.
Well, and I think that's maybe where the disconnect is at, is that we've looked at the situation and there's no justification for traffic calming measures in this local to local connection. Obviously, you can recommend things that are above the norm. I think at staff level, there is some concern that we would be setting a precedent for future development in the city when we have a stub street and connectivity is made. There are stub streets all over town that are going to eventually be connected to the adjacent subdivision. And so I think that there's a little bit of concern about a precedent setting. Now, maybe we want to address it through a policy change, or at least a policy discussion with the city council. We'll say I think that those have occurred in the past, and the city council has said they're not interested in having traffic calming devices all over the city.
Right.
And this is an individual case, and so with this plat, you absolutely can make a recommendation to do something outside of the norm. That would not be a problem.
And I understand setting a precedent, but if it's for the better, so what? Okay. This is a developer-funded installment. It's not someone coming, 5 years later and asking for some sort of help with traffic on the street and wanting the city to pay for it, which is all of us. And I just think that the one thing I'm going to disagree on is that you're right, it's not required, but there is justification. And the justification is the neighbors want it, and that's who we sit up here to represent.
Very fine. Commissioner Smith? I
Yes,
think
sir.
we'll go into discussion amongst council members here unless someone would like to ask the staff any further questions. One of the things that came up, and I sat down with Doug and talked about it, and Les was there as well, is the tenor of the commission was to add some kind of calming. One of the issues that came up, is my understanding, is the traffic engineer did a study there and says there is no calming necessary there. So we have staff saying that it's not really necessary, okay? And traffic calming can mean a lot of different things, of which, you know what I know about it? Very, very little. I do not have the expertise to decide what's good traffic calming and what's not. So suggestions were made. And the suggestion that was made, that was made and is in the packet had to do with 2 things, and that was, it's probably visually more of a calming method than it is architectural, all right? City has a concern about several things, and I agree with them on that, and that is, first of all, adding city expense for having islands and things like that or traffic calming is not something the city really wants, and I'm not sure if the city staff that knows this stuff, that I'm inclined to agree with them from the standpoint that spending extra tax dollars on something that's not technically necessary is not my idea of a good time, okay? So there was kind of reached this traffic calming that was put in that, if you will, was half a loaf, even though it wasn't the whole loaf. That is a calming mechanism, and it fits the need there, and yet via the traffic study, it doesn't need traffic calming there. So I understand what we're doing, and even though this may seem inadequate, in essence, it's better than nothing. Commissioner Roth?
So can someone explain about the traffic calming, what is it right now? Is it just brick, concrete pavers, kind of like they put on Johnson Drive recently? Okay. So I've driven down that, and since they've actually put that in, I've noticed myself kind of slowing at that area, so I do feel like it does work. It's just a visual, so I think it's better than nothing, I guess, and what's my opinion, anyway.
Commissioner Peterson?
First of all, I'm still a huge fan of this project, and I love what they did with the stormwater on I believe it's the center pond, where they made some revisions there, and so it's now going to take even more runoff than originally delineated. And then also, like he said, the cul-de-sac got shifted, and I think that will be helpful, very much so. My question is not necessarily project-related, it's more process-related. I'm the one that made the motion I thought it was adequate. Obviously, it obviously turned out to not be. In moving forward so that we don't have this, I think we could use a lesson in if we aren't able, if it goes against or it's above and beyond, perhaps, and I'm just going to pick on this one because it's in front of us all. If it's above and beyond what a traffic engineer can say it's good or not good due to the models they use, should we have some knowledge that we're asking for something that is more rather than just standard? Or that, how do we do something so that it may or may not have teeth, so to speak? And I think I could use a lesson because I feel like it's my fault that I wasn't clear enough that it made a recommendation. And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because this is a very good use of this property. I like what the developer has done. They've worked with the community. They've worked with you guys. I don't necessarily want to draw a line in the sand about this, and I would like to know more about the differences in versus what I kind of thought we were asking for versus the visual one we got. Does that make sense?
I could try to answer that.
Sure.
Anytime you make a motion, specificity is very good. I will tell you, I was at the meeting when this was discussed. There are numerous types of traffic calming measures, whether it be a speed bump, a speed table, a speed hump, a chicane, a roundabout, a traffic circle. So for us to kind of read minds and kind of figure that out on our own is very difficult. And that's what was the purpose of that meeting. I thought that we had came to a conclusion that was adequate, but apparently I was incorrect. I apologize for that. But
I will in the future try to make sure that the motions are more specific, because I thought I kind of felt like they were, but it wasn't that clear. So we're learning up here. That's what we get to do up here. But we all happen to be from the city of Shawnee, and we've all volunteered our time to bring resolutions to this stuff. So does anybody else have any questions on this? Any other comments? Commissioner Bienhoff.
Don't have a question, but I have a comment. And I was at the meeting as well, and I recall the discussion about traffic calming devices. And from my perspective, I am not a traffic expert, rely very heavily on the expertise we have within the city. That's what we pay them to do. And when I read the report, I was pleased that we looked at it. We had the discussion. As you look at the report, the curvilinear design of Richards Drive is expected to slow traffic to speeds commonly observed on local residential streets. And, you know, I don't necessarily want to see the additional expense or other things that may not be as aesthetically pleasing. And I think we need to, from my personal perspective, rely on the experts that we have in place in the city.
Any other comments or questions? Then I guess at this point in time, I think I'll split this out. Is the idea that's been put into the plans is for traffic calming as it is. And if that's the only objection to the plan being passed as it is, then I suggest we vote strictly about the traffic calming mechanism used. Does that make sense? Anybody have a problem with that or another suggestion? Would someone add a motion to say whether the traffic calming mechanism we've currently put in there is going to be adequate? Commissioner Willoughby.
I move for approval of the staff report as to the level of calming that we're putting in here.
One more time. I want to be sure. I'm gun shy now.
I move for approval of the staff report as written, that with the calming device that they have added.
Very fine. Is there a second? Commissioner Beanhoff.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve the report with the calming device that's currently in there. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Les Smith.
thank you. Just for the record, there will be no additional city expense to this, as it would be installed by the developer. The developer has also expressed apparently a willingness to do so. And the only thing we're talking about different than what you're looking at is that cross area has a 3-inch elevation. That's all we're talking about, and that satisfies the neighborhood and doesn't cost us a penny. I don't know why in the world we wouldn't do it.
And the current elevation as it's written now is how many inches?
It is none. Is it
It is
street level?
none.
It's flat.
It's an inlay, so this would be an additional 3-inch elevation on that.
Very subtle, yet very effective. If you read information that I've read a lot today about these, they are very, very effective. That's all we're talking about, 3 inches.
So we currently have a motion on the floor and a second. With the further discussion, would the person that made the second or the person that made the motion care to withdraw that? Or would we prefer to vote on the motion as it is? Seeing as they have not offered to withdraw it, then all in favor of the current motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay.
We have a show of hands or a roll call, please.
Right. The roll call vote, Commissioner Montgomery,
Aye.
Commissioner Roth, Commissioner Peterson,
Nay.
Commissioner Willoughby.
A,
I'm sorry,
yes.
Commissioner Beanhoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Busby votes aye, Commissioner Wise,
Aye.
Commissioner Brayley,
Nay.
Commissioner Les
Nay.
Smith, Commissioner Mudgett,
Aye.
Commissioner John Smith.
Nay.
And did you get the result of that? I'm sorry?
7-4.
7-4 in favor of the current deal. Okay. In that case, that part of it is settled. Then, if there's any other questions on this particular plat, then is there a motion or further discussion on approving this? Well, since we pulled it out, now we have to vote on the whole thing. Is that correct?
I think you did split it out to get a feeling of what the consensus was on the commission. So if you want to now have a final vote on that final plat, that would probably be appropriate.
Very fine. Is there a
Go ahead, David.
further discussion, or would someone make a motion on FP 181812? Commissioner Wise?
I'll make a motion to approve FP 1818-12, final plat for Kenneth Estates, first plat, 1,200 to 12,900 blocks, West 71st Street, per staff's recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Roth?
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of FP 1818-12, final plat for Kenneth Estates, first plat in blocks 12,400 to 12,900 blocks of West 71st Street. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carried. Thank you. That moves us into the first item of business for tonight, new business, PUD 0418-11, approval of rezoning from commercial highway to planned unit development mixed use and preliminary development plan approval for construction of mixed-use project located in the 16100 to 16300 blocks of West 66 Terrace. Application is filed by Bach Homes and Legacy Promenade LLC.
Good evening, Doug Allman from Community Development staff. This item was tabled at the November 19th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting to allow re-notification of surrounding property owners. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of Shawnee Mission Parkway and Mauer Road. The property is currently zoned CH. The area of rezoning request from CH to PUDMX includes the area of Lot 2 and Tract B as referenced on the preliminary plat 151709 that was approved as the overall Belmont Promenade project in 2017. The applicant is requesting to rezone approximately 7.945 acres, including right-of-way, for the construction of a mixed-use residential and retail office building on Lot 2 of the subdivision. The area of rezoning also includes open space and a pool area at the west end of the development. The proposal consists of 249 residential apartment units and approximately 14,351 square feet of retail office space in one multi-story building containing 247,649 square feet. The office retail portion will be located on the ground level floor at the east end of the building. The development will include surface parking for 361 vehicles, including 33 garage spaces within the building. The building also includes a clubhouse and a fitness area at the west end of the structure that overlooks the pool and surrounding terrace. Surrounding property to the north and east is Zone CH and is part of the Belmont Promenade development. You can see that in this depiction. This property is zoned and this plan was approved back in 2017. There was a request to talk about what was approved on the south side. There's an office development that was approved down here. This plan actually takes a pad site out from that original plan and just leaves this unit here. And then this is the floor plan of the newly proposed mixed-use building. The land use guide of the comprehensive plan designates the area as appropriate for the development of mixed-use destination-type uses. The proposed vertical mix of residential apartments and retail office uses within a single structure, as well as its location in relation to the adjoining large commercial center as part of essentially horizontal mixed-use development, is in compliance with the land use guide. In addition to the 14,351 square feet of retail and office uses, the residential component consists of 249 multifamily dwelling units in an area containing 7.5 acres. This yields an overall density of 33.2 dwelling units per acre. And in whole, the PUDMX zoning district will allow for a density up to 54.545 dwelling units per acre for 4 stories or above. Primary access to the Belmont Promenade development will be from Mauer Road, a designated major collector street. Access to Lot 2 within the property will be from 66 Terrace, which will be constructed along the full length of the development. It is anticipated this street will eventually provide an east-west connection between Renner and Mauer Roads. A secondary point of access will be provided by a shared private access drive from Mauer across Lot 3 to the east end of Lot 2 and back out to 66 Terrace. So essentially, this has become more of a primary or secondary, but it still has a function for fire access and public safety access to the back side of the site. The rezoning itself will have some impact upon surrounding properties to the south and southwest, primarily concerning visibility given the height of the structure, the higher elevation of the subject property, and the tall retaining walls that will have to be built to level the site. Screening, fencing, and the retaining walls are proposed to help mitigate impact of the development. The developer has agreed at the request of neighbors and staff to provide denser landscaping and increase the minimum size of evergreen trees in that area to provide a more immediate result. A detailed landscape plan, including fencing and planting details, will be reviewed and approved with any final development plan. The proposed plan will also result in the termination of Bell Road as a permanent cul-de-sac that will eliminate cut-through traffic from Midland Drive. That has been a desire of some residents on Bell Road. Denial of the request would not appear to benefit the health and welfare of the community. At a recent economic development strategy session, city leaders and stakeholders prioritized the creation of new mixed-use developments as an economic development goal. The city's comprehensive plan anticipates large-scale mixed-use developments to occur along Shawnee Mission Parkway, particularly in this area at Mauer Road, where large-scale commercial developments currently exist on 3 of the 4 corners. It is in the best interest of the community as a whole to provide additional retail, office, service, and residential opportunities along Shawnee Mission Parkway at a major interchange, and the residential component of this mixed-use project provides support to those uses. If approved, residents will have walkable access to newly created commercial, retail, and restaurant uses that will be constructed on this and adjoining sites as part of the overall Belmont Promenade development. The applicant proposes to construct a mixed-use building containing multifamily residential and retail office spaces on 7.945 acres. The development will consist of a single building containing those commercial and residential uses. The building is C-shaped and is approximately 780 feet long by 60 feet wide. The building will vary between 4 and 5 stories in height and will contain 247,649 square feet of floor area. It will include 249 residential apartment units, and 14,351 square feet of retail office space on the ground floor. The residential units will consist of 121 one-bedroom units and 38 studio units and 121 one-bedroom units that are just under 1,000 square feet, 90 two-bedroom units that are larger than 1,000 square feet, and 38 studio units that are 471 square feet in size. The building will span over an access drive to provide entry to surface parking located to the interior of the site. Additional parking will be shared by way of cross-access easements with the commercial pad located to the east and a portion of the Belmont Promenade development on the north side of 66 Terrace. Pedestrian sidewalks and crosswalks are proposed, and we'll look at those with any final development plan. Area requirements for the PUD-MX zoning district indicate a minimum area of 10 acres for the zoning district. The area contained within this rezoning request is 7.945, and that is a typo. I apologize for that. This is an increase in acreage as compared to a similar proposal that was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission in July of 2018. The Planning Commission and ultimately the governing body may approve a deviation to the minimum acreage required. The minimum lot size in this district is 10,000 square feet with a minimum of 200 feet of street frontage. The lot is rectangular and contains substantially more than 10,000 square feet and approximately 975 feet of frontage along 66 Terrace. Bulk regulations indicate the minimum building setback along the periphery of the district shall be 30 feet. Furthermore, when a peripheral boundary is adjacent to other property or property zoned for or containing single-family residential uses, the peripheral boundary is referenced at 75 feet, but is allowed at 50 feet with review by the Planning Commission. The majority of the building exceeds the 75-foot setback. However, the two end sections are set back approximately 52 feet on the east and west ends from the south property line at the closest point. This represents a setback increase of 10 to 20 feet from the previously recommended plan, and this was accomplished by pushing the entire structure and pool much closer to 66 Terrace. So essentially what happened is the building got a little skinnier and it moved up and it actually hugged the curvature of the street, which allowed those C caps on the end to be pushed about 20 foot further to the north. The PUD district also has a maximum floor area ratio of 0.25 as recommended by code. The project proposes a floor area of 0.365 using the 55% residential area discount that may be permitted by the Planning Commission and governing body. It should be noted that the floor area ratio for the PUD-MX portion of the development is naturally inflated because the recommended 0.25 FAR is tied to a minimum size of 10 acres, while this site is 7.5 acres in size. The PUD-MX district requires not less than 20% of the floor area be designated for residential use and not less than 30% of the floor area designated for commercial and office uses. Standing alone, this project proposes approximately 94% as residential uses and 6% dedicated for commercial and office uses. This mix does not take into account the 185,750 square foot of commercial proposed for Lot 1 of Belmont Promenade, or the potential of 3,800 square foot of commercial that has been conceptually shown on Lot 3 of the development to the east. For the entire 26-acre horizontal and vertical mixed-use development as a whole, approximately 45% of the total square footage is comprised of retail and commercial uses. The zoning district requires minimum residential unit size shall be 1,000 square feet for at least 80% of the units and not less than 750 square feet for all remaining units. The proposal does deviate from the unit mix called for in the code, but this is in response to a shifting market and demand. That is why a PUD allows flexibility in content. 121 one-bedroom units are approximately 930 square foot in size. 92 bedroom units are larger than 1,000 square feet at 1,143 square foot in size, and 38 studio units are 471 square foot in size. Without a deviation, none of the now popular studio units could be offered. In staff's opinion, it is important to allow the developer, an experienced multifamily builder, to determine what the target market is for a successful project. The applicant has provided 473 parking spaces on site for the mixed-use development. This includes 259 on-site residential stalls, 102 on-site retail stalls, and 112 stalls that can be shared with the retail uses located on the north side of 66 Terrace. Based on these numbers, it appears that parking provided meets the intent of the zoning regulations for mixed-use developments. Conceptual architectural elevations for the building that are in your packet indicate a modern contemporary design with varied height, flat roofs. The design consists of rectangular and cube geometry with balcony areas on many of the units. The building includes an arched opening for vehicles to access centrally located parking. Multiple floors of the building will span across the access drive. A variety of color and durable construction materials are proposed, including brick, veneer, stucco, and lap siding with glass and storefront glazing in the retail office area. Detailed materials and colors and architectural design will be reviewed with the building's final site plan submittal. The applicant has provided a conceptual landscape plan for the property depicting street trees and open space site trees. A detailed landscape plan will be fully evaluated in conjunction with the final development plan. The applicant will provide a 6-foot-tall solid board fence along the south property line to help screen the development from residential property to the south. Also, as requested by adjacent residents on Bell Road, open space areas at the termination of Bell Road will be planted in a natural vegetated state, including a native grass mix, numerous red cedar, and Norway spruce trees with a mixture of various deciduous trees. As previously required, the final landscape plan shall reflect a minimum tree size of all evergreens to be a minimum of 8 to 10 feet in height at the time of planting. The multifamily amenity policy suggests that multifamily developments provide amenities as listed in the policy. The policy suggests at least 4 amenities would be expected for development with over 200 dwelling units. The plan indicates a clubhouse area and exercise workout facilities to be located within the building. The preliminary plan also shows a location of a large outdoor pool, a surrounding terrace, a fire pit, and lounging areas. And what that is it's been, originally there was concept to have it here. I think we heard at the last public hearing that there would be concerns with noise. So the applicant moved that pool up. And if you're familiar with the floor plan, the exercise area will be here in the building and it'll overlook that terrace and kind of look to the west and to the northwest and away from those adjacent residences to the south. A letter provided by the developer's traffic engineer indicates the proposed Phase 2 site plan has reduced the amount of retail space in Phase 2 from 13,900 to 10,600 square feet. The number of multifamily dwelling units has increased from 232 units to 249 units. This change is expected to have a negligible effect on traffic generation in the AM and PM peak hours. No additional public roadway improvements other than what has already been improved with will be required as part of this site plan change. And because a lot of the report talks about requirements that are repeated in the recommendations, I'm just going to go ahead and go right to the recommendations. In terms of a recommendation, planned unit development zoning gives the Planning Commission wide discretion to use more flexible land use regulations and to make land use decisions that are most effective to facilitate creative, efficient, and cohesive land development patterns. They are intended to encourage innovation in residential, commercial, and office development so that growing demands and changes in marketplace can be met by providing greater variety in type, design, and land use of buildings. In particular, the PUD MX zone allows creation of planned unit developments that include a mixture of residential, commercial, and office in a single structure or multiple structures that incorporate a coordinated, consistent theme throughout the development. The purpose of these regulations is to encourage a mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented development located in proximity to major roadways and intersections. Belmont Promenade appears to accomplish this goal. In light of this, staff is supportive of the overall project and recognizes the efforts the developer has made to address concerns of city staff by pushing the structure northward on the site. Use of the PUD MX zoning for this portion of the project provides the greatest flexibility to accomplish this mixed-use development effort. As noted in the staff report, the applicant is requesting the Planning Commission consider the following zoning deviations. That is, 1, a reduction in the 10-acre minimum area required for a PUD MX zone. The total area in this request is 7.945 acres. 2, a 50-foot or greater peripheral boundary is provided in lieu of 75 feet adjacent to a residential zoning district. The building setback on the south side of Lot 2 is approximately 52 feet. 3, an increase in the maximum allowable floor area ratio of 0.25. The project proposes a floor area ratio of 0.365 using the 55% residential area discount that may be permitted by the Planning Commission and governing body, and deviation of unit sizes that are less than 1,000 square feet in size, as noted in the report. And if you look at the entire 27-acre site, if you do a rough FAR calculation, including the retail areas to the north for the entire 26.9 acre site, it's around 0.26, I believe. So in a context of a four-corner area, it's very close to meeting what would be found in a PUD zone. With the deviations noted above, staff recommends approval of PUD 0418-11, a preliminary development concept plan and rezoning from commercial highway to planned unit development mixed use for Belmont Promenade Center, a mixed-use project located in the 160-100 to 160-300 block of West 66 Terrace, subject to the following conditions of approval. 1, publication of the rezoning ordinance. 2, the final site layout and building elevations for this development shall require subsequent final site development plan approval by the Planning Commission. The building will be, expected to match a general color and material palette approved for use with the PUD MX rezoning, and the layout shall generally conform to that shown on the submitted preliminary development plan. Any major deviations from the approved preliminary development plan will be subject to re-notification and public hearing of a rezoning request to consider a new preliminary development plan. 3, all bulk requirements of the PUD MX zoning district will be met or in accordance with any deviations recommended by the Planning Commission and approved by the governing body. 4, no building permits for the project shall be issued until a final subdivision plat has been approved by the city and recorded at the Johnson County Office of Records and Tax Administration. 5, no certificate of occupancy shall be issued until all parking lots, including the off-site shared parking spaces for the development, are constructed, striped, and marked with ADA signage. 6, all landscaping will be reviewed in detail with the final site development plan. All disturbed areas shall be sodded at the completion of each phase. The developer shall provide evergreen trees at a minimum height of 8 to 10 feet tall at the time of planting along the south side of the development to provide maximum buffering impact. 7, building and site signage shall be submitted for review with the final site development plan. 8, all utilities shall be placed underground. 9, the street improvements required for this development shall be designed according to the standards in the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual as detailed within the staff report. Street improvements that serve this development are to be completed as part of the public infrastructure installed with the commercial portion of the development to the north. If the development of the southern portion occurs first, then required street improvements shall be completed as part of the mixed-use portion of the development. 10, the applicant is responsible for street improvements to Mauer Road, 66 Terrace, and partial roadway improvements to Bell Road, including a permanent cul-de-sac as detailed within the staff report. 11, commercial driveway approaches shall be designed according to the standards in the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual and as detailed within the staff report. The applicant is responsible for submitting street improvement plans to development engineering for review and acceptance prior to preparing the signature copies of any final plat. 13, site lighting details will be reviewed and submitted with the final site development plan. Site lighting shall comply with the requirements of SMC 17.70. 14, the development is subject to the provisions of SMC Chapter 11.08. stormwater management, which pertains to the city's stormwater utility regulations and is detailed within the staff report. 15, this development is subject to the provisions of SMC Chapter 11.16, stormwater treatment, which pertains to the implementation of stormwater treatment facilities and as detailed within the staff report. 16, the development is subject to the provisions of SMC Chapter 11.24, stormwater detention, which pertains to the construction and maintenance of on-site stormwater detention facilities and as detailed within the staff report. 17, the storm drainage improvements required for this development shall be designed in accordance with the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual, Division 2300 Storm Drainage. 18, the development is subject to the provisions of SMC Chapter 11.20, land disturbance activity, which pertains to site grading and erosion control measures. The applicant or landowner is responsible for obtaining a land disturbance permit as required by Codes Administration prior to undertaking any land disturbance or construction activities on the development site. 19, all private and public improvements for this development shall be constructed according to the applicable standards in the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. A public improvement permit will be required for all public street, storm, and street light improvements. 20, all fire hydrants and compliant fire flows and fire lanes as required by the fire department shall be approved prior to issuance of a building permit. Minimum fire flow and flow duration shall be as specified in Table B 105.1 of the International Fire Code. Fire flow is measured at a 20 psi residual pressure. 21, open space fees in the amount of $400 per residential unit, estimated at $99,600, or the open space fee rate in effect at the time the final plat is recorded, shall be paid prior to issuance of a building permit as provided by SMC Chapter 12.14. 22, the provision of the excise tax shall be satisfied prior to obtaining the mayor's signature on the recording copy of the final plat. The developer may enter into an excise tax abatement agreement with the city that would allow for the suspension, partial or in full, for the excise tax due, provided the final plat is approved and recorded prior to expiration of the suspension of the excise tax as set by the city. This agreement between the property owner and the city shall be created, agreed upon, and executed prior to obtaining the mayor's signature on the recording copy of the final plat. 23, the applicant is responsible for obtaining all such permits as may be required by all federal, state, and local agencies, including but not limited to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Kansas Division of Water Resources, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. 24, the applicant is required to provide construction phasing plans for the development. Additionally, the applicant is required to provide traffic control and signage during construction. Detailed traffic control plans are required to be prepared. The plans need to ensure that access is provided to all businesses and residences impacted during the construction of this development. Additionally, the plans need to ensure that emergency personnel can access all existing businesses and residences at all times. 25, the applicant is responsible for scheduling a pre-designed meeting with the development engineer prior to preparing the subdivision improvement plans and the individual site civil plans. The final plans for this development must be submitted for review and acceptance by the city prior to the issuance of a public improvement permit or building permit. And lastly, 26, all private and public improvements for this development shall be constructed according to the applicable standards in the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. A public improvement permit will be required for all public street, storm, and streetlight improvements. That completes our short report.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it very much. Is the applicant present? If you'd please come forward and state your name and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Greg Musel with the Rouse Fretz Law Firm, 5250 West 116th Place, Suite 400 in Leewood, 66211.
Is applicant in agreement with staff recommendations?
We are.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I want to introduce our team that's here tonight. Heather Trower is here with Legacy Development, along with Dan Lowe in the back, and then Steve Beaumont here, who are the development team who are trying to put together this project. This was before you last in July for actual discussion. I think it was here in your November agenda for continuance, but you heard a lot about it in July. We appreciate staff's recommendation and hope that you will appreciate the changes that have been made since you approved the plan in July. I thought the safest, simplest way might be to compare what you approved in July to what this has tonight, so you can determine whether or not you think those are improvements, and whether the approval in July has become even better today. We can put that up. No. These are so hard to see because the buildings aren't outlined in there. But in July, what we brought you was a 228-unit development. It is now 249 units, which is less about 9% more units than you saw in July. The density is 33.2 acres per unit versus the PUD district allowance of up to 54 units per acre. You'll recall that there was a lot of discussion in July about the setback on the south property line for the two legs of the building. At that time, those legs were about 32 feet from the property line. One of the stipulations you added was that that had to increase to at least 40. It is now 52 feet. So we've increased it beyond the 32, beyond the 40, to 52 feet, which is 62% more than it was in July when you added that stipulation. And we're 30% better than your stipulation, if you will, 12 feet on top of 40. The other thing I want to mention is on the west property line. On the west property line, the setback in July was approximately 125 feet. It's now 170 feet. So that has increased by 45 feet, or about 36% versus what it was in July. And as Doug pointed out, this is because not only did we move the building north to hug 66th Street Terrace, but we moved it east as well. In July, there were two pad sites on the southeast corner of the building, one of them of 6,500 square feet. That has been eliminated because now we have the inline retail that's part of the building itself basically in that site. So a 6,500 square foot pad site was eliminated in order to move the building further to the east, again, away from the Bell Road bulb. All the deviations that are requested tonight were also before the commission in July and were approved. We're not at 10 acres, we're at 7.9 acres. In July, we were at 7.5 acres. So we have larger acreage, closer to the 10-acre minimum, and better, closer to that than you were willing to approve in July. The 52-foot setback is bigger. The setback on the west side, which wasn't really an issue in July, is bigger. The floor area ratio is slightly better, smaller today than it was in July, 0.365 versus 0.37. On the unit size deviation, you approved the deviation in July, and I just want to talk about, in July, there were going to be 71 one-bedroom units. Now there are 121 one-bedroom units. There were 66 two-bedroom units. This plan has 90 two-bedroom units. The plan in July had 91 studio units, and this plan has 38 studio units. I'm like many of you on the commission when I look at the studio units and the square footage and think, who's going to live in that? But what we know is they're being rented all over Johnson County and the metropolitan area by people that are willing to do that because they don't spend as much time in their apartments as single professionals as maybe I did. I won't speak for each of you. But the reality is we have more one-bedrooms, more two-bedrooms, and fewer studios than were approved in July. And the average square foot of each unit, the average square footage of the unit is greater today than it was in July. I do want to speak, you had in your packet and in the public packet a memo from the Bell Road neighbors. They addressed these deviations, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure they're going to speak here tonight. But all of these deviations were considered in July, and all of the deviations are a smaller deviation today than they were in July, if you will. We're closer to every standard, and we continue to have staff recommendation. I think because we moved toward the standards and increased setbacks, did things like that. Couple final points. Staff comment number 6 demonstrates the city's goal. That was the one where they talked, that Doug read, that talked about what do the city fathers and mothers and stakeholders want. and what do they expect along Shawnee Mission Parkway at major interchanges. And what the city has said is we want mixed-use commercial, retail, office, and residential. And that this site in particular is a site that is perfect for that mixed use. In fact, this commission changed the comprehensive plan designation on this site to a potential mixed-use site back earlier this year. It's happening elsewhere. You're very familiar with Westbrook in your own city, Promontory Point at 91st and Metcalf in Overland Park. Even Leawood recently approved one of these at 135th and State Line. So this is not unusual to have a mixed-use project with commercial, office, retail, and residential. One of the things that has been mentioned, and you may hear about, is retaining walls. You'll recall several years ago, you had major battles over retaining walls. I'll remind you that this plan has lowered that retaining wall by tens of feet from the 80 or 90 it was, down to a height of about 30, which is in the middle of the site near the pond that runs into the property to the south. This property will not develop without retaining walls. It is a topographically challenged project. It slopes greatly away from Shawnee Mission Parkway, and there's no way to fix that without leveling it. One thing I do want to mention, because one of the stipulations you had in July was that four floors only on the west leg. We had 5 floors at the time, and you stipulated that you would not recommend anything over 4 stories. We're still at 5 stories because the density that's necessary, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a community standpoint, even 249 units is relatively small for an apartment complex today. But what we have done is extend the setback from 125 feet to 170 feet, so that the impact of that is far less than it was in the July plan. So we believe we've addressed the stipulations that you were concerned about and recommended as part of your approval in July. And I would just say, since July, I'm not aware of any changes in the comprehensive plan or the land use guide or the PUD zoning district or other city policies that would suggest that what was approved in July wouldn't be approved again tonight, and we're better than what was approved in July. We have responded to the concerns, not just of this commission, but of council members and certainly of the Bell Road neighbors who have continued to express their opinions about what they would like to have here. So anybody on the team here can stand for questions. We don't have our engineer here. The stormwater didn't change. The traffic Doug addressed. So what we're talking about here is really our site plan issues, and we'd be happy to answer questions. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Bienhoff.
Yes, question for the applicant. Could you help me understand and give me a little bit of perspective on the sight line? I know that was a major concern in the previous discussion, was the sight line, certainly with the five stories, and how the what it was previously, the sight lines into the next door property, I think was a major concern. How that compares with the larger setback. So have we essentially eliminated that concern of the sight line or significantly?
If you increase the setback from 32 to 52, then the angles of any sight line are going to change as well. So we have, I don't have a drawing here tonight, I don't have a sight line drawing, but clearly we understood that moving this building to the north, closer to 66 Terrace, was something that was important. And so getting that 52 feet instead of 32 feet mitigates against that concern, just as going from 125 feet to 170 feet on the west does it. I don't know that I can address your question by angles.
Certainly appreciate and understand that it will have some impact, but that was a major concern. I'm just curious what the true impact of that is. Does it actually address the concern, or are we moving it back but still have the same sight lines? We just have a further setback.
I'd have to draw, I did not ask anybody to do angles from a fifth floor window at 52 feet versus a fourth floor window at 32 feet. My basic elementary math tells me it comes out pretty close, but I can't tell you, make any representations as to that.
From my perspective, that would be very helpful to help demonstrate, have we truly addressed the concern? And I appreciate you moving the setback further, and I appreciate the changes that you've made. I think you've heard and responded to the Commissioner's request, but that's just one of the items that I still have some concerns about, how the apartments, their sightline into the adjoining properties and the neighbors.
Commissioner Roth.
Along the same lines there, I'm just trying to get a visual on, are we talking, it's just that one south elevation of apartments, correct? Versus the others are further set back?
Right, it's that
that one
southwestern
leg.
leg, if you will, the leg of the U that comes south. The southern end of that U is now 52 feet from the property line instead of 32 feet.
So is that two apartments on each floor? Is that one, what do the window elevations look like? Or is it one window for each apartment, or is it two on each floor there, on that
It would be-
elevation?
I'd have to look at the elevations.
I was struggling to.
This is,
You got the elevation. So we're looking, would be
Yeah,
over
right
here
there.
on this, the western end of the south elevation.
So it looks like you have 6 windows there. And,
Yeah, but
Right.
one space.
okay.
And it steps down on the west end and then it steps up. They're the same number of stories, but because of the elevation slopes to the west as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Montgomery?
Just want to confirm the number of units from July till now. It was 228 and now it's 249.
249.
And so being sensitive to the issue of there being enough density to make the project viable, you were able to reconfigure it and add units, but still not eliminate any of that elevation on the west side.
Correct, and that, again, we lost a 6,500 square foot retail pad on the east side, which is not something you give up easily. Because it's an important part, it was an important part of the initial retail development. But in order to move north and east, we lost that. But you can't lose more units, I guess,
I guess another way to ask the question is, the 228 unit complex was viable for you in July. Why does it need to be 249 today?
We don't know if it was viable in July. We know from working with multifamily developers, both before that and since then, that 249 is even small. But you have a limited site area to put something in. And so this is certainly dense for Shawnee. It's a new type of development when you talk about a mixed-use retail, office and apartments. So this is the number that we can fit on there and still make this plan work, keeping a retail pad site of 3,800 feet along Mauer Road.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Willoughby?
So moving the whole thing to the east, did that help with the Keaton residents as far as, we're looking straight north at the end of that building, or we're looking north and east, if you know what I mean?
I don't have a good perspective of exactly where Mr. Keaton's house is, but I'll bet Mr. Lysott will tell you where it is when he gets up here. I think it moved it just to the eastern portion of his house, which is better probably from everybody's perspective than where it was before, but I can't tell you exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry? Not yet, it will be. Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Bienhoff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for staff. Attached to the report was a memorandum from the Bell Road neighborhood. And just curious if you could help me out, because I don't have all the zoning regs committed to memory. But, and I know that in the past there have been some questions, but just if you would be willing to just kind of take a look at these and just help me understand the information that's displayed in part of this. Does it accurately reflect are the conclusions drawn accurately reflecting the guidelines?
I think it's a take on the deviations that we addressed in our report. The plan unit development zoning is very flexible for a reason. There's the ability to deviate significantly from what is hard line in the code. I would not argue that what's written here is not true. But when you evaluate a 7-acre or a 7.5 acre site for a site that's normally thought to be maybe out in the middle of the prairie, 10 acres in size, obviously this is more of an infill site with the other 3 corners being developed. You kind of have to contextually look at the entire development, which is over 27 acres in size. And so when you start, even though the zonings are different, you can't ignore the fact that there's interplay and cohesion between this as an entirely developable site. And so the interesting thing is that if the developer had wanted to do, say, just apartments as part of this and not have that retail office as a part of the building, they could have came in with a standard RHR, which is a residential high-rise zoning, and the bulk requirements are less than what you're seeing, and even at the deviated rate or sometimes less. That's the zoning that Westbrook came in with at 75th and Guevara, if you're familiar. That's an RHR, standard high-rise zone. But the intent, because it's a city desire to have a true mixed-use component, vertical mixed-use component, was to go with the PUD MX zoning. And that's kind of where you're seeing this pushing and shoving of some of the rules to deviations, if you will, to still get a quality project without overwhelming the site. So in my opinion, you have to take the entire 27 acres in the site and what's going on, not only on that 7.5 acre site, but what's going on around the development in terms of retail, restaurant, potential for workout facilities, those kind of things that can make a project really special.
Thank you for
I
that
don't know if that helps, but-
Yes, thank you for that clarification. It's very helpful. And I do appreciate the developer looking at this and adjusting the layout and moving the building further north and to the east, which I think was part of the discussion we had previously as well. Thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Brayley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's a question for developer. Noticing that you've brought Bach Homes into the mix for this, I wondered if your team has done kind of a market analysis specific to Shawnee or within a region to say, is this, an asset that's going to be very successful right from the get-go? I mean, what's your feel? I mean, obviously, you're not going to do it if you don't think it's successful, but what is the market telling you and why this mix is going to be a successful mix for?
It may be that Steve or Heather can talk different, but among all the mixed-use developers, there was a lot of interest in this. And, they're looking at projects all over because these kind of projects are going in different places. Bach Homes has 2 products in the metro area, 1 under construction and 1 built, I think both on the Missouri side. And they've looked at this because they think this is a good demographic location. That there isn't a product like this, which is one thing. There are a lot of new apartments all over Johnson County. There isn't a project like this in this part of town.
Okay.
And so they think it's going to be successful. And as I always tell people, it's not my money going into it. If they're going to build it, they're not going to build it unless they believe that there's a market to support it. And based on what we know so far, we believe that to be the case.
Do you know, I mean, can you recall anything specifically that they would have called out as to why they felt this a desirable location for a project like this?
I don't have that. Steve, you want to come up and? Name and address.
If you'd state your name and address too, please.
Steve Beaumont, 7003 Renner Road, Shawnee, Kansas.
Thank you.
Nick Mason is the guy running point for Bach Homes and Development out of Salt Lake City. He and I have been working a lot together the last few months. He's been to Shawnee a number of times. He does send his apologies. I talked to him today. He's got another meeting in another city tonight, so he apologizes not being here. Hopefully he'll be here next time around or something. Visiting with our fair city. Couple of things. First, to answer your question with regard to the needs analysis, the thing that really got Doug's attention, or Nick's attention rather, was the fact that there have been so few Class A apartments built in this corridor, specifically in Shawnee, in a long period of time. And one of the things that they like is they like the tech that's appearing along 435, on the north side with Dairy Farmers of America and Cerner, and on the south side with what's going on in Lenexa at Kiewit, acquiring all those companies. So there's a hardy tech corridor over there. And what they have noticed is that Shawnee Mission Northwest, DeSoto, Mill Valley graduates coming back, wanting to settle back near their home, can't. And they think that there's a significant market for millennials that are like that, that are wanting to come back, settle in their city, and they're settling in Lenexa, they're settling, Village West or someplace out south. He also has expressed an interest, he thinks that there's also empty nesters, that want to downsize, want to have the lifestyle, but remain close to their family and their roots. And so that was another one of the things that drew them to Shawnee. So I think the market demand, the pent-up, and the education people hopefully settling back here in town, those were the main motivators for them.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if I may just address one thing, you guys asked about the sight lines. A great way to understand the sight line issue is if I'm standing on top of a 3-story building and you guys are 20 feet out in the parking lot, I can wave at you. If I take one step back, I start to disappear really quick. If I take 2 steps back, I disappear even further. The 54-foot setback significantly diminishes the sight lines. I don't know if that would help you visualize it or not, but thanks.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? I have one question. I presume these will be market rate apartments.
Correct.
Thank you.
I always hesitate to say that because what everybody wants to know, there's no incentive, there's no market incentive or no subsidy to the rental rates that will be on these apartments.
Thank you.
That's a better way to say it. And since Ann Smith Tate is here, I am going to mention PBI Gordon for high-tech jobs that's located in Shawnee that will have people staying in Shawnee. Right, Ann? So be happy to come up afterwards and respond to any concerns or questions.
Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you, Mr.
questions
Chairman.
for applicant or staff? If not, Commissioner Peterson, I'm sorry.
See, I was just being so quiet, you forgot I was here. I have a question, and it has nothing to do with elevations. It has nothing. I noticed that tandem parking was a part of this, and I'm not certain we have addressed any tandem parking issues in our fair city before. And obviously, I know that Bach's history is that they get this and they understand this. I know that a very long time ago, I purchased a condo in another city and it had tandem parking and had issues. I was just curious, is that just, we're attempting to use the best space to get the most? Please talk to me about tandem parking and why we chose that.
I asked the exact same question the first time I saw it show up. Yeah, so I called Mr. Mason and I asked, hey, what are you seeing? I've not seen this in Johnson County, specifically in my backyard.
Right.
And he says, we've had great success with this. It works great for the 1 and 2 bedroom units where they front and back. Hey, who's going to work first? Okay, you park on back tonight. And that's a way for them to get their density up. He says it works very well in some of the markets they're in other states.
Okay, thank you. Vacation.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, as this is a rezoning, then we'd be under public hearing. Does anybody from the public wish to comment on this? Would you please come forward, state your name and address, and sign the little book? And we've learned legibly as a part of that, too.
I'm sorry, where's the little book, sir?
I do not know, but we shall send an attendant to help you.
Okay.
There is no book.
Just remember the legibly part. That's the really key word on all this.
I'm old and I scribble.
Thank you. Said I didn't play school enough for school when I was a kid.
I'm a southpaw and you've got a right-handed desk here.
It's probably a right-handed ink pen, too. But don't let that throw you off.
Oh, I brought my own, sir. My name is Richard Travers, live at 6838 Bell Road. Excuse me. And might think of this as Yogi Berra said, Yogi said it's deja vu all over again. I made a similar presentation last July to your commission. And at that meeting, I showed this illustration. It's a scale illustration, and it shows dimensions on it. And at that time, we were looking at sight lines, excuse me, to the Keaton property, the backyard and patio, from the top 4 floors of the building. The building was 60 feet away from the Keaton property at that time. You recommended that that be moved to 70, 40 feet from the property line. And it's now at 82 feet, 52 feet from the property line. Mr. Keaton's home is 30 feet from the property line. This is the elevation illustration that I contributed to the little memo that came to all of you. Excuse me. The building is now 83 feet from 83 feet above Mr. Keaton's property and 82 feet from his home. It has an unobstructed view, at least according to the preliminary plans, the site layout that's been provided. It has clear sight lines from all 6 levels, all 6 stories of the building. Now, I appreciate the fact that the first and second stories in this illustration, the basement and first floor, would be easily enough screened. A high enough fence, plenty of foliage, that could easily enough work. I heard a little bit earlier that the trees that were to be planted would be a minimum of 8 feet tall. And I don't think that's going to screen the top 4 floors of this building in any way, shape, or form, nor will it do it in 20 years. The tenants will be able to see down from their windows and porches right into the backyard where the Keaton children play. I want to show another illustration. There was some question about whether the movement of the building to the east would improve matters from where they were before. The building is now 170 feet from Bell Road, or from the Bell Road property line. Mr. Keaton's patio is 168 feet from the Bell Road property line. Simply improved the view. Now both the east side and the west side of the west wing of the building will be able to look down into that backyard. Before, it was only going to be pretty much the east side. By the way, this drawing is to scale. At the meeting last July, many of you had concerns about the proposal that was not as high nor as intrusive as this latest plan. You required changes to be made to the plan. I don't think the developer heard you. Or perhaps they have chosen to ignore you as they have our neighborhood. We've asked them to discuss changes. We've asked them if we could offer some input. We've asked them if we could meet to discuss all of the things that I'm illustrating here this evening. They have simply declined. We've never heard from Legacy Development since the last meeting that we had with them, which was, to say the least, abusive of ourselves. We've not heard from the new developer that's been brought into this, Bach Homes, other than a phone conversation that we asked for, we initiated, and we were simply told by them that they were simply not interested in any input from our neighborhood. They had a plan, it was going to be presented, and we would be able to come and look at it. This is a clear invasion of privacy. It cannot be eliminated by trees or fences. It's simply too high, and it's in the wrong place. This section on the west end, I've drawn a red circle around it, and I've drawn an arrow pointing over to a new wing in the building. Now, I'm not an architect. I am a fairly good illustrator. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is if you move that 5-story high building, 6 in total, if you move that 5-story high building over to the central section of the apartment complex, it will not be an imposition on the neighbors as it is today. The portion that would simply be a good idea to leave there is the first floor on the parking lot side and the basement level and the first floor of the west side adjacent to the pool and the workout room, fitness center, and a few apartments could even be incorporated into that. It would end up being 1 story high on the parking lot side and 2 stories high on the west side. It would not in any way, shape, or form impose on Mr. Keaton's property or anyone else's property. Those 5 stories of apartments, though, would still exist, and they would exist in a location that would appear to be a pretty good spot, pretty good place to put them. Another advantage to moving the west wing to the center would be fire department access. As it's currently drawn, currently located, there is no access to the west side of the building for firefighting equipment. They would have to walk in, and they'd have to bring their own ladders, and they'd have to be pretty darn tall ladders. If I were the fire marshal, I think I'd recommend that access be provided to both sides of the apartment buildings. Let me conclude by saying the Bell Road neighborhood is not opposed to the development of this site, either the 4.5 or 4 3/4 acre, or 7.5 acres for the apartments, or the 26 acres for the total project. We're not opposed to it. I think we've probably gotten, or you've gotten the impression that we're opposed to it because we come up here and speak about issues that are really problematic for the neighbors. We would applaud and would sit by the developers and congratulate them on a good design if they would simply not shun us and tell us that we don't know a darn thing about anything. I'll conclude by saying that we would ask you to send them back to the drawing board, accept input from you, and accept input from us. And they'll have a darn good design, and it'll serve our city well. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Travers. Does anybody else care to comment on this? As is the others, if you'd state your name, address, and write it legibly on the little book.
Okay, they're over here. Okay, there's this one here. 200. All right, don't forget to sign in, Chester.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Alan Godsey. I live at 6800 Bell Road in Shawnee, Kansas. We're longtime residents of this neighborhood, and our property will touch the southwest corner of these apartments, seen on the map. I'd like to remind the Commissioners of a couple of things. First of all, we did not oppose the 2017 plan. We were okay with that project plan. That plan was approved for this very same location that's being considered now. 2017 plan was set back further, had significantly lower building heights. Specifically, the building heights were distances were 203 feet from Bell Road. Now they're approximately 170 feet, and the building heights were about 2 stories. Now they say they're 5 floors, but there's a basement, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And so that's 6 floors if you count the one that's stacked behind it. So also then we spoke about the July meetings. During the July 2nd, 2018 public hearing, the planning commissioners voted against the preliminary plan with a vote of 9-1 against. The motion that later passed required a rezoning subject to a reduction of the number of floors on the southwestern apartment buildings and some other setback requirements. Now developers have showed up again without a reduction in the number of floors, and in fact, with an increase in the overall height, and an increase in the number of units, and an increase in the density of the project. Prior to this plan in front of us now, prior to the plan that's in front of us, the previous plan from July 2018 was 107.8 feet above the base of Bell Road. The current plan is 115 feet above the base of Bell Road. Not only did they not follow the planning commissioner's motion, they went blatantly against it by increasing the heights. Remember that the Blue Jacket Lodge, it's right over here, next to City Hall, is approximately 70 feet tall. To give you some scale. People, this thing is super high and it's really weird for our area. I find that this total disregard for the commissioner's previous motion requirements for floor reduction to be very disrespectful to you, the commissioners. Now I want to speak to the golden factors of rezoning. Golden factor number 1, the zoning uses and character of the neighborhood. Currently, the area requesting rezoning has an empty lot and 3 homes on it. The surrounding neighborhood to the south and west are comprised of large lot, rural residential properties with upper scale single-family homes on them. We submit that putting a super tall structure like these apartments atop of the hill above the neighborhood does not fit with the character of the neighborhood at all. Golden factor number 2, the sustainability of the property for the uses to which it has been restricted under existing zoning. As recently as last year, the developer thought that the current commercial highway zoning was okay. What changed? Golden factor number 3, extent to which removal of the restrictions will detrimentally affect nearby properties. Can uses allowed in the requested district be good neighbors to the existing development? Well, in that the proposed apartments have extreme height and close proximity to the neighboring properties, especially Mr. Keaton's home, we will, in effect, substantially damage his privacy and his property value. We submit the answer to this question is no. Golden factor number 4, the length of time property has remained vacant as zoned. Well, first of all, the property is not vacant. As mentioned, there are 3 homes on the property. More importantly, this property was rezoned to commercial highway in 2015, and there was a development plan in 2017 for a retail project on this very spot. So the property has been showing development activity and interest under the current zoning, which is subjectively speaking, hasn't been very long. Golden factor 5, relative gain to public health, safety, welfare, and destruction of value of the applicant's property as compared to the hardship on other individual landowners. We believe the city's responsibilities to the citizens located in this neighborhood need to be considered carefully because as proposed, this will create extreme hardship on the local neighbors. Skipping to golden factor number 8, opposition or support of neighborhood residents. Our neighborhood, simply put, is in opposition to this plan as it currently stands. And I and others will be speaking to some specific objections tonight. Golden factor number 9, conformance with comprehensive plan. Does the request agree with the adopted comprehensive plan? Well, we think that this preliminary plan does not. I will read some items from the comprehensive plan that we think relates or addresses some of our concern. I also want to make a note that all the items out of the comprehensive plan that I read tonight were taken from the Shawnee website last night, December 16th, 2018. Therefore, this is the most current information. From page 4-5, 3.0, utilize extensive buffering and screening of intense land uses to lessen their impact upon residential areas when feasible and appropriate. From page 4-3, 2. Encourage development which contributes to the economy of Shawnee without compromising safety, comfort, aesthetics, or neighborhood harmony. From page 5.2-2, residential land use. Residential land use is the dominant form of land use in Shawnee. The planning process must emphasize the protection of established residential areas in order to enhance Shawnee's regional status as a desirable but stable bedroom community. From page 5-5, the following land use policies have been prepared to guide development and of adjacent to those areas identified for residential land use. 1, to protect the integrity of residential neighborhoods by requiring extensive buffering and screening of adjacent higher intensity developments. A landscape buffer zone which incorporates the use of berms and coniferous trees to protect the residents and should be provided for all residential development adjacent to primary arterial or higher intensity use. I'm going to paraphrase the next just a bit because there's no senior living, it just doesn't apply here, and so I'm going to remove the senior living aspect. From pages 5-2 and 5-3, the land use guide delineates 4 density levels for residential development. 1. Rural residential, 1 or less units per acre of the development. This type of residential use will most likely be on septic systems. 2. Low density, which is 5 or less units per gross acre of the development. 3. Medium density, 5.01 to 10 units per gross acre of the development. 4. High density, which is 10.01 or more units per gross acre of the development. So this project has an apartment density of 35.5 units per acre. So this makes the project clearly high density. Our neighborhood is rural residential, which is lower than low density. So we have the highest density butted up against the lowest density possible. When I look at the city planning guides for other cities in Johnson counties, I see transitions from low to medium, then medium to high. And we have the expectations that smooth transitions would be provided for our neighborhood. Where is our appropriate transition from these apartments, which are the highest density, to our neighborhood, the lowest density? And now back to reading from the comprehensive plan from page 9-1, implementation. I find this section kind of interesting. Advice is recommending a decision or course of action. This can be provided by the Planning Commission, the City Council, or interested citizens. Every effort will be made to encourage and utilize the advice of the general citizenry. The Planning Commission and City Council, through public hearings conducted on each development proposal in the city. Controls are generally legal documents such as zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, and housing, buildings, and sanitary codes, which are established to regulate the standards of development. These controls become the minimum accepted standards of development since nothing less can be undertaken. It is through the active enforcement of these controls that development standards, which are extensions of the goals and objectives, are maintained. These controls should be acknowledged as minimum standards, while recognizing frequently minimum is not sufficient. That was discussed earlier. They're saying do better than minimum. Tonight, we the citizenry, in the spirit of the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Guidelines, are offering advice. Richard had very specific suggestions that the city hold the developer to better than the minimum standards, given the particularly damaging aspects of this project to our neighborhood. So finally, I wanted to make a comment, go on public record about potential flooding issues to our neighborhood. I'd like to note that climate change predictions include predictions of an increase in the number and size of flooding events in the future. We want to remind the commissioners that our neighborhood resides along the streamways that are downstream from this development site. We feel that given the height and steepness of the project, that designing the stormwater components to 25 and 100-year storms is inadequate. This project has proposed storing water in tanks under the parking lots. But we know that when the tanks fill up with water, then the runoff is going to increase to amounts that have never before been seen by our neighborhood. We'd like to go on record that our neighborhood has not been flooded in all its history, and that we have great concern for what is being proposed here in that regard. And finally, zoning regulations. It's also taken from the city website yesterday, 17.02.010. The purpose of this title is as follows, E. To protect and conserve the value of land throughout the city and the value of buildings appropriate to the various districts established by this title. We ask that you, the commissioners, value and conserve the value of our land. Thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Godsey. Does anyone else care to speak on this matter? And as we're running late, I'd appreciate you being concise.
I will attempt to do so, but in
Thank you very much.
fairness, we've been here over an hour listening to the developer. This is our one opportunity to speak to you all. As been indicated previously, the developer chose not to speak with us, so we would like to be heard.
And you're stating your name and address after you sign in?
Once I sign in, I will gladly do that.
Thank you, sir.
I'm trying to be legible because I know I'm normally not.
And as I've stated before, legible is very important.
Good evening. My name is Don Lysett. I live at 6850 Bell Road. I have been a resident of the city of Shawnee going on 25 years. You've heard these other individuals have been here even longer than I. And we have a neighborhood that we like, we think is very tight. We all get along. It's large lots, very low residential. We like that. I think Mr. Travers made an excellent point. We're not sitting here saying, hell no. What we're saying is, let's talk about it. And to this point, that really has not occurred. And I will share with you, that's not only with the developer, but attempts to talk with the mayor and our city council members. We tried to schedule a meeting and we never received a response after we gave them specifically what our concerns were. That's why, and perhaps I was a little curt, we want to be heard here this evening. I want to correct a couple errors that appeared in the staff report, and
Doug corrected one, but so we're perfectly clear, this is not 7.945 acres. It is 7.495 acres, just a tad less than 7.5. And the reason that's significant is your zoning requirements, your minimum zoning requirements call for a minimum of 10 acres. Here we have 3/4 of that, and that is even more compounded once you factor in all the units that are going on that 75% of what your minimum is. At page 4, section 3 of the staff report, the second paragraph states that the maximum height of this building is 70 feet. That is simply incorrect. The drawing that was put up was one that was redone. Here is the original drawing. And if you recall, the drawing you have in front of you, as you look at it on the left-hand side, shows 70 feet as the height. This is the identical drawing from this developer that first submitted. And Doug had asked them, the only change in the documents are they had front elevation, back elevation. They did north, south, east, and west. But as you'll see on the area that's cut off on your document, they're showing an elevation of 77 feet, 10 inches. That's exactly what that reads there. We strongly believe that is incorrect also. Mr. Travers is an engineer. He's spent extensive time showing that that elevation, that building, is actually going to be 83 feet above ground. And getting back to my point earlier about the developer not communicating with us, we made a specific request of this developer almost 2 months ago, say, put these elevations on a topo map. We know you got them, the prior developer had them. It was not done. We asked the city to require the developer to put these drawings on a topo map. That was not done. And I cannot think of a reason why other than it's pretty dramatic when you look at it. Some of you were out there to our area over the summer and actually saw firsthand what we're going to be looking at, and especially Dusty Keaton's going to be looking at, Mr. Keaton, who will speak here shortly. 82 feet away from his house is a building that's going to rise from ground level 83 feet in the air. And I was just curious tonight when I walked in, I paced off, and this is rough, I'm not going to kid you, it's exact, but from that back door, the entry door to this Diaz is about 80 feet. So as you look out there and look up 82 feet, it's pretty tall, and it's awfully close. I want to address a couple of the violations of your various guidelines. And everyone says, well, we can massage this, we can do that, and it's a little twist. Well, they start to add up after a while. They're supposed to be there for a reason because they're the minimum guidelines or the minimum zoning requirements. And this proposal repeatedly violates those. I'm going to read here from land use guidelines. Slopes in excess, guideline number 3, slopes in excess of 15 degrees shall not be permitted for urban or suburban development. We've calculated the slope on the west side of this building from Bell Road to be approximately 25%, 25 degrees. Guideline number 7 states that intensive development, which clearly this is, adjacent to low-density residential, which clearly we are, the developer is required to lessen the activity, the units, and I'm quoting now, along the residential area and additionally require, quote, large setbacks, close quotes, and extensive screening and buffering. 52 feet is not a large setback, and as you know, 75 is what is supposed to be there. Yes, it can be changed to 50, but 75 is what it's supposed to be. Under the residential land use portion of the land use guides, the planning process is to emphasize the protection of existing residential areas. An apartment that's 6 stories high, 52 feet away from an existing property line, 82 feet away from an existing residence, that does not comply. And that is, frankly, in my opinion, an insult to the land use guidelines. We've talked a little bit about density. I'm not going to beat that horse again. This is way, way dense. And part of the reason why it's way, way dense, it's on such a small tract. Developer could have used the rest of his land there, or he could have put this up in the north section that everyone wants to keep tying together. But this is a totally separate zoning proposal, and it's got to stand on its merits, not what's next door to it or across the street. And I would point out that the land use guides also provide that with anything more than 15.55 units, which this has at least double, if not triple that, the developer is, quote, to provide exceptional design and use of high-quality materials. Exceptional. There's nothing really exceptional about this project. Is it nice? Does it look nice? Yeah. What's exceptional about it? It's an apartment building. Now going to address, just very briefly, the development standards for PDUMX, because I want to get these all on the record. 17.54.43, large A, it's at 10 acres. We don't have it. 17.54.440, Prens 2, mandates the 75 feet distance from adjacent properties. We don't have it. 17.54.440B provides for a maximum floor area ratio of 0.25. Here, the reality is it's 0.58. Even if you discount it, which is only supposed to be done under exceptional circumstances, it's 0.38. That criteria has not been met. 17.54.45A, not less than 30% of the total floor area shall be designed for commercial and office use. There's a total in round numbers of 18,150 square feet of commercial and retail space. Out of a total square footage here of, again, a round number, 326,500. That's only 17.9%. Again, a violation of your own code requirements. Again, talking just briefly, 17.5445B requires 80% of the units in a PDUMX to be more than 1,000 square feet. There are 249 units here. 80% of that would be 199. Under this proposal, only 90 meet that requirement. Again, this proposal does not meet your minimum requirements. That same section goes on, states no units shall be less than 750 square feet. Here, there's 38 of them. It does not meet your requirements. 17.54430F requires that 20% of the area shall be devoted to open space. Quite candidly, this might be close. It's not anything that anyone has really addressed. But if you're calling the area that cannot be built on as green space, I think that's a bit of a misnomer. We said previously, and we will say again, the last project that was proposed to you was too tall, too dense, too close. This hadn't changed. The only change that really has occurred is it's been moved to the north from that south property line 10 feet. but the density has increased. They've added apartments. They haven't reduced the height. I know Mr. Musil got up here, and I understand it's his job. The reality is, they've increased this project, and you've got a chance to look at it and think about it and do something about it. The proposal before you tonight violates approximately a dozen of your own code requirements and land use guides. And I would point out and again reiterate, these are minimums. So why are we trying to make sausage here? We're going to make an exception here, and we're going to make another one here, and make another exception here. I think I'm correct in the statement. This is the first PUD-MX that's going to come to this city. And you're setting a precedent of what will happen with other ones. So you've essentially eradicated what your minimum requirements are going to be. All we're asking is you enforce your own rules and regulations. We live by them every day. You live by them. A developer coming in from out of town should live by them. And frankly, we're a little disappointed, A, not having had the opportunity to meet with a BAC representative, B, there is no one here from that company tonight to talk to you. I find that disconcerting. Here they're coming in, they're asking you to make all these changes, and yet there's no one here from that company to look you in the eye and answer your questions and to respond to you. Again, this is just being shoehorned into too small a piece of land. As we've said, and we'll say again, we're more than happy to meet with the developer. We offered some solutions last time. We offered some solutions now. We're asking that you table this and require the developer to meet with the residents of Bell Road to effect a compromise that we can all live with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lysott. Does anyone else from the audience care to weigh in on this? That's fine. If you'd please state your name and address, and as we've stated several times, legibly write it in the book. Thank you.
Just kind of a view off my back porch. Dusty Keaton, 6745 Bell Road. My home is the property directly south of the proposed development. I have lived there for 15 years and grew up at my parents' house just to the south, 41 years on Bell. My home is located 30 feet from the south boundary of the development, directly in line with the apartments being proposed. Those apartments will be 82 feet from my home. They will be 78 feet high and 82 feet above my home. The people living in the apartments will look down directly into my home, backyard, and patio. My children play in the backyard, and we enjoy using our patio. I do not think it is fair, nor do I think it is reasonable just because the developer planned it this way to get maximum number of apartments. I'm sure if this was your home, you would not find it acceptable. You are my only recourse. I ask you remove the west wing of this project to prevent this gross intrusion on my property. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Keaton, thank you. Does anybody else from the audience wish to weigh in on this matter? If not, then the public hearing is closed and we're in commission discussion. Occasionally we have silent discussions up here, just so you know.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to anything that was held in the public hearing on behalf of the applicant, since our name was taken in vain?
Well, I don't think your name was necessarily taken in vain, sir, but if you'd like to respond, just please briefly.
I just...
Thank you, Mr.
We were
Musil.
accused of insulting this commission by not making changes to the plan. we were accused of not meeting with the Bell Road neighbors. There have been multiple meetings over the last 2 years as Dan Lowe and Steve have been the developers and have contingent contracts on this. There have been phone calls. There was a phone call with Bach Home. The reality is we can't find a solution that will satisfy them. But to suggest to this commission that we haven't tried or that we didn't respond to what you told us in July is simply not accurate, and I wanted to make that clear on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Musel. Now we're back in commission discussion. Commissioner Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what the developer has done to move back the setback, and I think that's an improvement, but I think a critical desire that I don't know if everyone had, but certainly I did, was to see if we could lower that part of that building, and somehow the developer managed to add 21 units but not do that, and I guess I want to say I'm disappointed by that, and I think that it is an awful tall development there for those neighbors, and I respect their concern, and as I said in July, I heard from them again tonight, they're not opposed to the project. They would just like to see some modifications to that building height, and so I wish that could have been done, and I'm probably inclined to vote against this tonight because that hasn't been accomplished.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yeah, I'll second what Mr. Montgomery said. I do appreciate the effort. I know this is a challenging site, but it seems like the height really has not gone down. It could have, even if it were a stepped type approach or something, I think the massing could be improved. I do feel like the plan improvement, getting this thing shifted north, has improved at least the setbacks, but the height and the massing at the southwest corner, I mean, I agree with the residents on Bell Road. I think it's going to be a challenge for them, and you know, it's a, like I said, I know it's a tough site, but I'm just hoping maybe there's a solution that helps mitigate some of this southwest leg.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Braley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to again commend the residents of Bell Road for again coming before us and expressing your concerns, and I will tell you that they are very much heard. I guess we are in one of those difficult situations. I was, at the last time, was one of the individuals that voted against the plan last time for the reason of the height of the building, and again, we came back with a really not what appears not being able to accomplish that. With that said, I want to make sure that the message gets across to the developer that this type of project, I personally would say, I want to see happen in Shawnee. That's why I asked the question about what the market is demanding. I have children 15 years old now. I would like to have, this be a completed project so that if he wants to move out and come back to Shawnee, that there is a product available to him. I heard from my nieces at Thanksgiving, I specifically asked them, they are living in apartments now. What was your biggest challenge? That one of them's living in Merriam now. To have higher density so that they could have a studio apartment available to them, because it's hard to find a roommate. So I'm not going to get hung up on the mix or the size of a studio apartment or whatever. I like the concept. I want to have this happen. But I also want to tell you, I'm hearing what the residents are saying, and I don't know financially what it's going to take to get the numbers. But as Commissioner Montgomery had pointed out, you've worked it out to where you've gotten more. And I'm not the architect to say, but a resident has, Bell Road resident has offered a solution. It's a broad brush. It might not work for lots of reasons, and I know you're shaking your head no at the first brush. Are you telling me that you looked at that as an opportunity?
It takes away all the parking where that building would be,
Okay.
so there's no way it can work.
Well, okay.
I'm sorry, that's just
Okay, and then when I saw it, that's what I counted. You're taking away parking spaces, but I'm of an optimistic personality where I would say, find a solution. It's parking spaces, it's asphalt, other places in the property. But if it doesn't work and we don't meet city code, then that's what it has to be. But again, I'm going to voice, along with my other commissioners here, my disappointment in that one particular item that we pointed out last time. On that particular location, we couldn't knock 2 floors off of it. And we're not even talking, I wasn't even thinking the whole wing, as Stephen here, an architect, stair stepping or doing something with the massing so it isn't so massive looming over that backyard. Seems like that would have been something we could have seen some movement on. Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson.
This is one of those topics where, depending on whoever's presenting at the time, you can find things to agree with. Very much like Commissioner Braley, I am a huge proponent of bringing, do I live in an apartment today? Nope. But I lived in one for a long time. I have 3 kids who are graduating from college and in college, and their options are not to live in Shawnee. Shawnee Mission Parkway and that exit gives a very perfect location. I understand the topography of the site. It really is not very fun to build on. That it's a good location for this type of environment, just like the infill of 75th and Quafira, where the Westbrook Village was a very good fit. I don't personally understand it right now. There are days when I have to do yard work that I understand it. But this is everything that I am hearing from the younger generations when I am in a mentorship, is that I don't want the responsibility of a yard. I don't want to have to own a mower. I don't want to do those things. I want to spend that time traveling. I want to spend that time doing other things and not even considering the investment. I understand that there will come a day that that may change as they get older and develop into families. Who knows? But I don't have a crystal ball. The market is yelling for things like this, and I see Shawnee missing the boat. Do we want to do this at the expense of your lovely neighborhood? I even looked at a house on Bell Road. That's a really tough decision to make. One of the questions that I have, though, is it's not that what you're saying isn't important and you're not being heard. You've obviously heard that from more than just me. But there are more than just the residents on Bell Road that we have to consider. We're here to represent all of Shawnee, what is best for the entire city. And we have to look at those things too. And it makes this somebody's going to be upset. And on another sidebar, I do get the density in a sense. I didn't buy the property, and I'm not gonna tell the developer what can make that profitable. They're not in it to lose money. Yes, it has to conform, and yes, we can talk to them about things, but it's not as easy as taking a Lego block and moving it from here to here. I know it's much more complex than that. So letting both sides know that this is not easy for any of us. And thank you for your time.
Commissioner Les Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Doug, will you just confirm for us that we are well within our authority and the intent of the mixed-use development to recommend approval of all of these issues?
Yes, it's brand new development, recommendation to the governing body,
Secondly, just kind of a factual point, we talked that the developer hasn't lost anything. I don't know if lose anything is the right word, but they have eliminated 6,500 square feet of retail. Is that correct? I don't know what that rental rate would be, $18, $20, maybe higher. Do the math on that for 12 months, and there's a substantial, I think they're probably upside down on that deal. And last, I made the motion last time to scale the building down by one floor, but I came to the stark reality not long after that quite frankly, we can't scale it down enough, because if there are apartment units going to look down on the residential property, chances are they are going to be opposed to it. So I don't know what we can do other than to scrap half or all of the wing of the building, and that works really well, because then the project is not feasible. So in my mind, it's either we approve it or we don't approve it. In order to accommodate the residents, we would need to lose that building, and that doesn't work. In essence, it would be killing it.
Any other comments in commission discussion? One of the things that has troubled me, and it's troubled everybody that's ever looked at that property, it looks really nice from the highway. And then you decide how damn much slope there is and how many things you have to fight to do it. And I'm sorry to say, Mr. Keaton, but whenever that's developed, however it's developed, if it's tonight, if it's next year, it ain't going to be pretty for you, sir. And there's nothing that I can do about the slopes to make it easier. I just can't do it. One of the interesting things also is when I was over there this summer and looked over the properties along there and drove up and down Bell Road, I really estimated there were probably 5 properties we're talking about that this will be a hindrance, and it will be a hindrance. But it's not all of Bell Road. The majority of Bell Road can't see that far. So you're talking realistically, you're talking a minimal amount of properties. You're talking about a development that is very much needed and very much wanted from the elected officials to everyone else, that we want and we need this type of project that's mixed use. It doesn't mean it's easy to put it together. It's not easy for the developer. It's not always easy for us to put it together. But the demand is there, and here's a person willing to do it. And somebody's going to walk out of here. I have no idea how those are voting, but somebody's going to walk out of here not happy with what happens. And that's just the fun thing about being on this, is we've accepted the responsibility to give you a decision on it. And I don't see a reason why we can't go forward with as this project is right now.
Let's say one other thing, Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Commissioner Les Smith.
Oh, don't ever call me Kathy Peterson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really mean it.
That's right. And I just want to throw out, I mean, I know what we're all looking at, what we're talking about, and it's gut-wrenching. It might be only one property in the grand scheme of things in Shawnee, Kansas, but it's 100% of that young man's property. And it's tough. It's a tough deal.
Thank you. Commissioner Willoughby.
All right. So what we're talking about really is Mr. Keaton's place. So why wouldn't we move the retaining wall that's at the south end of the building close to the property line? Yeah, he's going to have to look at a retaining wall, but, and then when you put, spruce all along that wall, that's going to shield him from the end of those apartments. Now, now he's going to have the wall there, but he's going to have trees on top of that will effectively, even an 8 to 10 foot tree on top of that, would greatly reduce, what you're seeing. And the only other thing I got to say about, Peeping Toms from next door is every 2-story and 3-story house in Shawnee, okay, can look into their neighbor's house, onto their patio, into their yard. And I mean, those houses are sometimes 14 foot apart or 18 or 20. So, I agree, we're talking about more units here, more windows. But I think along with, I think moving the retaining wall to the south and then, doing the tree shot with spruce that are fast growing, 8 to 10 feet, start them at 8 to 10 feet, and in 5 years, they'll double in size.
Commissioner Mudgett.
Yeah, this is and I don't mean to restate what already has been restated, but this is a very cool project. It's a great opportunity, I think, for Shawnee, and it's too far in between that we see these kind of projects. And if it's not built here, it's going to be built somewhere. As several of you have said, the market is very much in demand for this kind of project. I think we're fortunate to get it. I think we're fortunate to get it at this site, which is a very challenging and difficult site. And I applaud the members from the Bell Road Association. I applaud your efforts. I know how difficult that is to be in the middle of it from both sides. I get to live in some of that every day. I'm also competing for some of the people that we're talking about that would immediately utilize this project once it was completed. People that are at Kiewit, people that are part of the new tech corridor that runs from here south. And believe me, if we vote no, this will just get built somewhere south. And we will continue to become less and less relevant than we are now. This town needs some wins. We need some big wins. And I hate to say that, whether it's Dusty or the rest of the folks there at Bell, but it is the few. And I think Shawnee needs these kind of developments to stay competitive and stay relevant in the metro. And with that, can we make a motion?
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve PUD 041811 as recommended by staff.
Is there a second? Commissioner Roth? There's a motion and a second for approval of PUD 0418-11, rezoning from commercial highway to planned unit development mixed use and preliminary development plan approval for construction of mixed-use project located 16100 to 16300 blocks of West 66th Terrace. Any further discussion? Commissioner Wise?
So Doug, I'll ask the question, is there a way, and we did this last time and unfortunately did not see it, but to request some additional modifications, whether it's to the retaining walls, landscaping, massing of the building at that corner, or is it a yay or nay at this point?
In some ways, in some respects, I would defer to the developer to see if this is absolutely the plan that they have to have. You can always make a recommendation with changes, whether or not they're comfortable with those, I guess they kind of have to live with. I would be curious to know essentially what you're asking, and then we should vet that with the developer.
Commissioner Wise, would you explain what you're asking? Specifically? We like specifics.
Yes, I have heard specifically and legibly, so this should be fascinating. What I would state is that an adjustment in the retaining wall and the landscaping on the south side and stepping back at least a portion, and I'll just start with a third to a quarter of the upper 1 to 2 stories of that southwest corner, and then also potentially reducing the number of windows on that south elevation. If we were able to incorporate, at least several of those changes to help mitigate the view to Bell Road, is that feasible?
Procedurally, I would remind you too, there is a motion on the floor with a second.
I'm sorry, Doug?
There is a motion on the floor and a second to approve as submitted. To go down a different path would require a rescission of the motion. That is correct. This is a land use decision. There is discretion on that final development plan, but I would get back into specificity of what we're expected to look at with that final.
So any further discussion?
Chairman.
Commissioner Peterson?
I believe we should, a motion has been made and it's been seconded. I say we move forward with that. At this point in time, I think we missed our opportunity to do a recommendation, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion to approve PUD 0418-11 per staff recommendations, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Roll call.
Here we go, voting again.
Okay. Counting heads. Commissioner Montgomery.
Nay.
Commissioner Roth. Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Willoughby.
Aye.
Commissioner Beanhoff.
Nay.
Commissioner Busby is yay. Commissioner Wise.
Nay.
Commissioner Braley.
Yay.
Commissioner Les Smith.
Yay.
Commissioner Mudgett.
Aye.
Commissioner John Smith.
Nay.
Nay? No? Okay.
Hey, that was.
That would be 7-4. Do I get that right? 7-4 in favor, so the motion passes. Thank you very much. At that point in time, we go to other business.
No other business except to remind everyone that at our next meeting, first meeting in January, we are going to have an impromptu work session and discussion about meeting dates and times, length of staff reports and possibly changes to the way that we staff report, and the idea of paperless packets for those who desire them. So be thinking of that over your holiday, and we'll have a discussion about it first meeting in January.
Does the commission have anything for staff? I have one thing, and that is, you know what? I thank the staff for all the work. The city staff of the city of Shawnee is incredible. If we have questions, we ask them, they give us straight answers. And I've always appreciated that, and they've always been very kind. So, quite frankly, but I'm sorry, but I'm really old school here. Merry Christmas to everyone, and a Happy New Year to all. Commissioner Braley?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have one more thing. I just want to, but take the opportunity to just ask a question to staff regarding the intersection there out west at Shawnee Mission Parkway where the McDonald's and the new library and everything. Now with the new library, it seems the congestion is starting to occur quite a bit. So is that being looked at and addressed now?
Kevin Manning, Transportation Manager. Is there a specific time of day or issue that you happen to notice out there, or just
Well,
general
it's-
congestion?
Yeah, the time I notice it, only because that's when I'm going through there, is kind of between, I guess, probably around 3:30 to 6:37, when you've got a lot of high school traffic showing up at McDonald's and the library, and then the foot traffic that's occurring between the two and Chipotle, and not using crosswalks. Then it's the left turn if you're heading west on the street in front of McDonald's, needing to make that left turn movement to get up to Shawnee Mission Parkway. You know where I'm at? What street is that in front of the,
I think 60,
what is it? 60,
66 Terrace,
Is it
I
Hilltop?
believe. So Hilltop's the north-south road there. You're talking about the east-west road?
no,
coming out of-
north-south.
North-south, that's
So yeah,
Hilltop,
you're
that's
going,
correct.
you're heading west and needing to make that left turn movement onto Hilltop.
Yes.
To get it, that,
Yeah,
is it
that's-
66?
That's the
is-
east-west road running
Yeah,
in
it
front of
just-
McDonald's and Chipotle, or to the north of
I've
that.
just seen some more than 4 near misses within the last 10 days, just because of people wanting to turn left and people coming around by the library, and it just, I think it's new, and it might be just people are starting to get used to that there's increased traffic. I just didn't know if I'm the only one that's noticed it, or if the city's noticed it. Have you noticed it, John? Okay. Okay. Oh, you are? So have you heard, or?
With the library opening, we definitely know there's been an increase in traffic up there, and just the commercial just south of 66th, I mean, there's kind of a lot going on there, so we are aware, and part of the issue there is the proximity of that intersection to Hilltop and Shawnee Mission Parkway, and so there's a lot for people who are making that movement that you're describing, the westbound to southbound movement, that left turn, there's kind of a lot to keep track of. You're looking to the north, people are coming around the curve, and then you're also looking at people coming off of Shawnee Mission Parkway, whether they're going north on Hilltop or turning right or left from Shawnee Mission Parkway, there's just a lot there to kind of be aware of.
Yeah.
That's something we're aware of. I'm not going to say I have a silver bullet for it, but part of the issue is just the proximity between the intersections. But I do appreciate you bringing that to attention.
Okay, all right. And then I don't know, is there any plan to restripe the center lane there after the construction occurred? Because it's very faded after construction.
Yes, I've gotten some requests from the public on that. So when weather warms up a little bit, we're going to be going out there and kind of restriping some of the intersection markings.
Okay.
And just so you're aware of too, we do have a project we're working on design right now to basically add some sidewalk along Hilltop from Midland and basically connect, going across Shawnee Mission Parkway all the way to the library. So that's currently being designed and be constructed in the summer.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, sir. I'm really sorry, Mr. Chairman. Does that help?
Yes. Commissioner Les Smith?
Thank you. Don't get too eager. This is not what you think it might be. Just real quickly, Doug, I forgot something on the Kenneth Smith stuff. There's two different places in the staff report and the recommendation where it states that construction traffic shall not use 74th Street, shall only access the project from 71st. Can we post that at the entrance of Hauser and Blackfish? Because, a cement truck heads up that way and realizes he can't get there. That doesn't help anything.
We would imagine would control that with signage. Yes.
Okay, very good.
And we will also have enforcement staff hopefully in the area when the construction's happening.
Here, we're kind of running into a situation now with folks parking in the temporary turnaround. And so we've had fire trucks, trash trucks, delivery trucks having to back down the street. A tad bit hazardous. So that, that would keep that from getting any worse, I guess. Thank you. Sorry, sir. Can I redeem myself?
Yes. Commissioner Smith, we're very happy that you weighed in on that. And honestly, I'm being serious now. I'm glad you did.
Thank you.
Commissioner Willoughby.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Doug, so like in the Kenneth Smith Estates thing, where like phase one or not phase one, what do they call it? Plat one. They don't meet the requirements based on the frontage, the road frontage, but for the whole development, it does. And it states that at the end, but
You're talking about the percentage of lots within the
Six-
16, 65, and 70 plus.
right.
We look at that as the entire development. as a
Okay,
whole. So,
okay.
yeah, the percentages don't work out
To
for
you,
each particular plat, but when you look at the subdivision.
Right.
they do.
right, okay. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Peterson, you keep this up and I'm not coming back till next year.
I just wanted to talk about that too. And first of all, I apologize. If anybody goes back and reads July 16th minutes, I fumbled enough with making that motion. It takes up about a page and a half. But I would really like some direction from staff and those that are weighing in on how best to do those recommendations. Because I know, I totally messed that up. Do we need to say things like,
Yeah, thanks a lot.
you shall address this instead of being pleasant about it? And then will that give it the teeth it needs to imply how serious we are? And if we're not serious about that, then it'll get voted down. So my deal is I think with this new process where we are allowing, completely in favor, developers to come in and do the pre-plat, so they don't have to have the whole ball of wax tied up in a bow when they start. I love that. But I really think it begs that we are able to pay attention and keep track of kind of what we want, and not that we get the wish list that others don't. But how do we even know what we asked for without going back to look at all of the comments that were made? I had to come and ask you when we looked at it in July. I had no idea where to go look it up. So I was pretty sure it was me that messed up the motion because I remember it. But my deal is I want this to work, but I think we need to send a unified thing. If we put a suggestion in there and it doesn't make sense, or there's things that you know more than we know, or vice versa, then I'm thinking that we're giving not only the citizens that come to the open meeting, but the developers a bad gig, because it's not a concise and confronted idea moving forward. It's like, she really didn't mean that. Well, yeah, I did, so I think we just need to clarify that part of the review process so that we don't have hiccups like this anymore.
I would just repeat kind of what we've talked about already. Instead of saying something like take into full consideration with the final plat, traffic calming efforts, say must include traffic calming efforts.
Okay.
Because professional staff will look at that, evaluate it, and if it's not warranted, that is a consideration.
Yeah.
And not included. So there was a
Well,
disconnect
but
there. I did
this
not
can be
honestly-
considered a visual traffic calming effort, but that was not my intent either. I wanted more than just a visual. I wanted something that was going to give people pause
That's what
to
it
stay
looked like.
closer to the what, but I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't even know what's available out there unless I Google it, and then it's probably still wrong.
If you think about what actually was included.
You didn't do that to anybody
was
else.
the shortening of the cul-de-sac was specifically talked about. The vision of the headlights was specifically talked about, and so staff made sure that those were addressed.
That was perfect.
But the consideration, full consideration,
hell
we
it's
looked
not.
at traffic, we looked
Sure
at the
is.
sign. And so if
Well-
it goes beyond
serious.
that, then we have to know what exactly you're talking about. We can't.
But I
Yeah,
think that's
you
gonna
can't sue.
discourage people from doing that because they're not gonna know enough to be that specific.
It's a contract.
They know they
It's
have,
directly off
what options are there out there, I think this is something that probably needs to happen before 10 PM. There's some people wanting me to not ask any more questions. But I'm looking for, if that's what we want, how do we make that happen? And if you can't be letter of the law, legal, concise, because you don't have the expertise, that means we're not gonna make it, because we can't make it airtight. I think it's a discouraging process right now, and I don't think that's what was our intent. Does that make sense? Probably not. You guys are looking quizzled.
Mr. Chairman, I know I only have 30 seconds, so I'll be brief. I promise.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Commissioner Les Smith.
Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner Peterson. My disappointment came from the fact that regardless of what it said verbatim, I felt it was perfectly clear that that was something that was important to us. At that point, it's not, unless, and I'm going to always add the caveat, all things being equal, okay? Unless there's a hazard, an unintended consequence, it's just flat, dangerous, something like that. I should have addressed you, but I let him take the sword for you tonight. What I'm looking for is not if we can do it. I want staff to come back and tell us how we can do it, because that's how we want our recommendation. So if we want it in our recommendation, you come back and tell us how we can do it. What is the most acceptable method, whatever in the heck it might be, but still meets the intent of, I don't have to get into making a motion and saying, well, call it a traffic calming feature, and it has to be 3.5 inches high and meet the APW. Don't do that, but I want you to come back and tell us how to do it, not if we can do it. And then you can recommend the heck out of it to us, and you can recommend the heck out of it to the council if it goes forward. But I need it to be, in my mind, I need it to be our recommendation, okay, when we go down that path and not anyone else's. I'm finished. Turn off my mic.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Beanoff,
could I get 30 seconds, please?
you got it.
I appreciate everything Commissioner Smith said. From my perspective, I would also like, and I expect our professionals at the city to challenge us on our requirements, because we're not design, I should speak for myself. I'm not a design expert, so if I want something, I would hope and expect the professional staff to basically tell me, you don't know what you're talking about, and here are the reasons that we either agree with your request or not agree with your request, and here's our recommendation.
Commissioner John Smith.
I move we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Montgomery,
I would second that motion.
and I'm
please.
not asking for discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
We're done. Thank you. Thank you.
Threatening to do that all year. This is my last shot. I knew I wasn't gonna get it. I had to get it in. Hey, throw your water bottle away, you little pip.